It's weighing in, NJ.com's high school wrestling podcast. How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Weighing In, NJ.com's high school wrestling podcast. Episode 6 coming at you right here as we're right in the thick of things. Dual meet season is firmly underway. We've still got plenty of conference and county tournaments going on, also some big out-of-state tournaments, some girls wrestling we're going to get into, a lot of stuff going on. We've got a big interview, one of New Jersey's best on tap for you today. Indiana football won the national championship, which is a crazy statement to say in 2026, but that is the world we're living in now. So without further ado, I'll welcome everyone in. I'm Bob Batters, your host, alongside with our NJ.com wrestling reporters, Joe Zedalis, Bill Evans, Ryan Patti, and Jake Aferiat. And later on, we'll be joined by NJ.com's girls wrestling reporter, Mike Holcombe. So gentlemen, another interesting week of wrestling around the Garden State. Again, as I mentioned, some big tournaments on the conference and county front. We also had the Escape the Rock tournament out in Pennsylvania with many of New Jersey's best teams. Some big-time dual meets that came down to the wire. Teams making some noise, jumping into the top 10. Some teams potentially on their way out. So we're going to dig in right here. And we'll start right across the river in Pennsylvania at the Escape the Rock tournament out of Council Rock High School South. Several of New Jersey's top teams there, including Blair Academy, who seems to be in all these big-time tournaments that our NJSIA schools are going to. We had plans of heading out there, but they kind of moved the goalposts on us a little bit, where that ended up being a one-day tournament because of the weather. But that didn't change the results. We had 4 champions from New Jersey, 2 of our NJSIA guys, and Bill recapped that all over the weekend. So, Bill, I mean, like I said, I counted them up. I think it was about 10 or more teams ranked in the NJ.com top 20 were there. Several of the top wrestlers in the state competing. It's always a prestigious tournament in this area. And 2 of the champs are guys that we kind of expected to be there, and that's CBA's Paul Kenny and St. Joseph Montvale's Christian Alvarez. So what'd you think of the tournament overall for the New Jersey guys, Bill, obviously with the champs leading the way?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, they consolidated it in the one day from 2, and that might have changed the results. I mean, you got kids going there who planning to wrestle 3 times, and all of a sudden now they got to wrestle 4 or 5. If they would have had that night of rest and come back the next day, some of those semifinal finals results might have been different. I don't know if some kids ran out of gas at the end, especially based if they had some really tough matches leading into those later rounds. It seems like I think in the last 8 years they've had some sort of weather event in 4 of them. I know a couple of years I've driven home in a blizzard, and then this year they probably the right decision to move it to one day, but it did impact the tournament for sure. As far as who won, Paul Kenny won for the 2nd straight year. He continues to dominate. We've talked a little bit over the last few years about how he didn't score a lot. It was always very tough to score on. Now he's added that offense to his game. Ended up beating St. Joseph Montvale's Mikey Bautista 13-2 at 127 pounds. They were using PA weights, so a little different from New Jersey weights, and also from what I understand, there was about a 4-pound weight allowance. So a lot of these weight classes, kids were basically 5 pounds heavier than what they would have been competing in New Jersey. So basically a weight up in many cases. In addition to Paul Kenny, Christian Alvarez, who I know Ryan's going to be talking to a little later on, the heavyweight from St. Joe's Montvale, won a wild 13-12 final against Kale Milnick of Blair. Usually you don't get heavyweight matches that are that crazy, but it just showed the athleticism of both of those guys who continued to score. Alvarez came back in the 3rd period to win that one. And then Blair had 2 champions, Michael Bautista at 121, not to be confused with St. Joe's Montvale's Mikey Bautista, who faced Paul Kenny, and then Salasarni at 189 over Tanner Hodgins. And that was 13-4. Those guys wrestled at the Beast of the East a few weeks ago, and Hodgins was winning that 6-5 all the way up to the last second. Sarni took him down. So it was a very surprising how lopsided that was, considering how close the first one was. that was a match. That was a weight class with Sarney and Hodgins and Dominic Sumpelek from Notre Dame, who were all ranked in the top 10. And Hodgins did beat Sumpelek 7-6 in the semis. And again, that could have been a situation coming off a tough match like that, which I believe was Hodgins' fourth of the day. Now going into a fifth match, that could have impacted his performance in the final. Some kids that didn't win, where we had a number of finalists, but Charlie Esposito and Brian Little, both from St. Joe's. Esposito beat Justin Farnsworth of Malvern Prep 2-1. Farnsworth, number 2 ranked kid in the country, Rutgers commit, beat him in the semifinals, but lost in the final. And we'll probably talk about that a little later, but that helped move him up to number 1 in our rankings. And then Brian Little, who's a guy we've had our eye on going back last year. I think it was a 16 seed. Gave Sammy Spalding a tough match in the second round. Spalding ended up winning it and going on to win the state title, but we've always felt highly of him. He beat the top seed, 6th ranked kid in the country, Cano Dillard of Bethlehem Catholic 4-1 in the quarters. Then beat Chase Hansen of Lower Cape May, who had never lost a match prior to the state tournament up until this year. Now Lower Cape May did add some big time tournaments this year that they hadn't been in the past, like Escape the Rock and Sam Cali. Hansen won the Sam Cali, but ended up losing here to Little in a close match. That's a possible state semifinal or maybe even a final. Who knows? That those guys could see each other again. But yeah, some nationally ranked wins for our guys, some championships. Again, a little bit of a crazy scenario in the fact that they folded this all in the one day. But definitely another big performance from New Jersey out at Escape the Rock.
Yeah, it's always a great tournament out there, and it's a prestigious one too. So you win a title there, certainly that is that's a big accomplishment. And just if you wrestle well there, you can certainly take a lot from there. And I know several of our New Jersey wrestlers will look to do the same going forward. That was far from the only big time event of the weekend. We had the Bergen County tournament up at the Garfield Middle School. Ryan and Jake were on hand. Some nice storylines coming out of there. Didn't have the full complement of teams. You had St. Joe's was at Escape the Rock. There may have been some other teams weren't there. You guys can fill us in on that. But you guys had a bunch of stories coming out of there, a lot of interesting storylines, Ryan. So what, of all the happenings there, what caught your eye the most?
Yeah, before I actually talk about the Bergen County tournament, I want to talk about what we saw in that match between Bergen Catholic and Paramus Catholic on Thursday. Another match that came down to the last bout, and Bergen gets the win this time. 2 years ago, it was PC getting the win in that last bout. But Matt Mulligan, a huge 7-6 decision win over Joey Polici at 126. That matchup would happen again on Sunday at the county tournament, as we'll talk about in a second. But big win for Lucas Reeves at 132 as well over River Hibbler. And then Sausy Say stayed off his back against Nicky Polito at 138 to secure the they only won by a couple points. I believe it was 30-27. So some fireworks to start that match. You had Ceach Hibbler pin Gideon Gonzalez out of a Peterson. And then Nick Barone pinned Joey Rondinelli. So 12-0 start for PC. The place was going bananas. I went deaf, I feel like, in both ears. But another night where Bergen guts it out. You see how far along they've come, but also Paramus Catholic. I mean, Paramus Catholic is having one heck of a year. So, and then Bergen obviously carried that momentum into the county tournament, and they got 6 champions. One was Mulligan. He beat Polici again. This time it was 11-6 in a match that, really was never close. The first match was close. Mulligan had to battle back, but Polici this time really was never in it. Mulligan kind of took it to him. He actually told me after the match in the duel, I'm going to beat him even worse. And that's what ended up happening. But, Bergen ended up having 13 medalists in total at the county tournament. And Coach Santoli mentioned a couple kids. Chad Sadaka, a senior 190-pounder. He avenged a loss against Guy Olsner in the final. Olsner beat him in the duel. And then, Sadaka's a kid who really kind of struggled with his weight. You didn't really know what weight he was going to go at with each year. He was a 132-pounder as a sophomore. He wrestled pretty much the entire year that year. And then 113 as a freshman, was a backup last year. So he kind of bounced around a little bit, and he's grown into his frame. He's really coming to his own at 190, and he looks like a really good wrestler for them in his final year. And then Peter Stathis, who is a backup 190-pounder, he entered the tournament at 215 because Mason Mark didn't wrestle. I guess they're going to be, match counting him. He's kind of racked up his matches, but he looked really good at 190. Status did, and he medaled. So he's a kid who normally doesn't get an opportunity like that, and he was able to wrestle in the tournament, and he took the podium, and Coach Santoli was really proud of that. And then as for Ramapo, I want to highlight Ramapo before I kick it over to Jake, who, our alma mater, Jake, Pascack Valley, looked pretty darn good, but Ramapo, they had their best showing in over 2 decades. Ethan Brantley and Gino Gorga both won titles. It's the first time that they've had 2 champions at the tournament since 2004. Brantley's a freshman. He wrestled through a pretty, it looked like he was in pain with his shoulder. He comes back and beats Will Claus and pins him in the final, the Northern Highlands standout. And then you had Gorga, who on his way to the final beat AJ DeGiovanni, who we had ranked at 135 coming into the week. Gorga beats him, gets out of a reversal late in the 3rd period, and then he tech falls Ryan Sclavonos from Westwood in the final. So both kids really looked dominant. Ramapo really looked dominant, and they were the 2nd team behind Pascack Valley in the public school scoring standings. So, Jake, let's talk about Pascack Valley here. I mean, what a tournament for the Panthers.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, our alma mater clearly, showing out, that there's good wrestling, not just at, Bergen Catholic, Don Bosco, wherever in Bergen County, but at the public school level too. And yeah, you look, they had 2 champs in Jacob and Sarah at 138 and Luke Stemkowski at 157. The I guess more surprising result to me, and, Jacob and Sarah sort of even said as much as, he shut out Sauzy Say from Bergen Catholic, who's a state medalist in that final. And, he said he thought he would win. He didn't think he would win by that much. But, he transferred in from Bosco this year. And I talked to co-head coaches Steve Schneider and Gary Beyer afterward. Did they know what they were getting in Sarah? And, they said they had some idea because, he had spent all this time around the program and with the kids who were there now, growing up. But, when they finally started rolling around with him, they could see, oh, wow, no, like this kid's really got some potential. And then Stemkowski picked up a 4-2 win over Paramus Catholic's Harry Satrian in his final. And, it's interesting. Both guys have beaten state medalists this year, obviously. And Sarah did it at the finals of the Bergen County tournament. Stemkowski did it at the Sam Cali when he beat St. Peter's Prep's Joey Ruiz. And these are 2 kids who didn't make it to Atlantic City last year. And so they're showing, like, not only are they at the level of being a state qualifier, but that they're, potentially guys who can go down to Atlantic City and make some noise. But even beyond those 2, PV had, 8 medalists altogether. They had 1 more in the finals. They had, 2 take 3rd place. So, I think this is a really complete team. And, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention that they're off to an 11-0 start in duels. And, they haven't really faced much resistance. Their closest win right now was, a 10-point win over Paramus in the Big North duels. Everything else has been, 15, 20 points or more. Now, that's going to be put to the test Wednesday when you hear this against Don Bosco, who was, a perennial top 20 team. PV is going to carry its 11-0 record into Ramsey, into, that gym. And, I think that's, Ryan and I talked about it. I think that's going to be a great match. I think both teams match up well and are strong in some parts, and so I think it's going to be strength on strength. But yeah, I think PV is establishing itself not just as Bergen County's top public school, not even, necessarily as, whatever other superlatives you want to add. I think Ryan and I would agree. We peg them as the favorite right now in North 1 Group 2. High Point obviously is always tough, but, from what we've seen from PV, I think you'd be hard pressed to bet against them.
Yeah, a lot going on in that tournament, and you guys did a great job covering it, nailing all the storylines. And again, that was far from the only county tournament. Some other ones going on: Union County, Somerset County as well. Jake, Union County. I mean, Cranford has had a stranglehold on that county tournament for a long time, and they came through again, the Cougars, but it was not easy. I mean, it took some down to the wire wins late, in those championship matches to secure another title.
Yeah, so Cranford, we talk about dominance of a specific area. Cranford might typify that better than anyone else. They've won 11 straight now Union County titles. This one they won by 9.5 points over second place Rahway. I was talking to a longtime Cranford parent, and Kevin Murray, who also runs youth wrestling there. He said he projected the Cougars to win by about 10. They finished as 9.5 point winners. But yeah, we had 3 Rahway Cranford county finals. I think Cranford had 6 in the wrestlebacks. Rahway had 7. Rahway I think had more finalists than Cranford did. So yeah, it was give and take up until the bitter end right there. And at 190, when Rahway's Andrew Avent pinned Cranford's Joey Sinapura in the final, the gym went nuts. I think people were clearly rooting for Rahway and hoping to see Coach Dan Gary's group pull the upset and make a run, knock Cranford off its perch. But Coach Pat Gorman told me afterward, he said he tells his guys like they don't need to apologize for working hard and having success and doing all these things. Like, this is the product of what they've done, and they shouldn't feel shame about that. And, the other thing too is, they had 2 kids win their 4th county titles, and Michael Daly at 120, Luke Schultz at 157. They're the 10th and 11th wrestlers respectively in Union County history to ever win 4 county titles. They're only the 3rd wrestlers in Cranford history to do it. Tom DiGiovanni was the first for Cranford. He won his 4th in 2017. But even beyond that, there were great stories. Plainfield, which had the longest championship drought of any team, ended its drought with Rainier Brighton at heavyweight, winning 4-1 in sudden victory against Rahway Zaire Barron. Linden freshman Alvaro Fernandez, he was the Tigers' first champ since 2019 with an 11-5 decision, and it was great. His dad is the head coach at Linden. So it was great to talk to them and just what that meant. And then Jake Capello at Roselle Park, the freshman 106-pounder, he was named the outstanding wrestler of the lower weights, and I think it's for good reason. He knocked off Westfield's Daniel Berardi in the 106-pound final, and Berardi was not only a defending county champ, but a defending region champ as well. And then in Somerset, Bob, Immaculata in its 3rd year really as a program. Spartans come in, kind of run away with the team title. I think they had 6 or 7 champs on the day. Again, we had a 4-timer there in Watchung Hills, Anthony DeAndrea. So that's always a great story. And he was only the 2nd wrestler in program history to hit that mark. And then, we talked about them a little bit earlier this season, but, Manville, here that they are, this tiny little Group 1 school, again, still undefeated on the year. They take 3rd place in the tournament, and that's ahead of, Watchung Hills, which won the tournament last year. It's ahead of Bridgewater Raritan, which is a Group 5 school that, made a state final last year. They finished within 10 points of Ridge, who's a Group 4 school. So, here Pat Gorbatuk is, with this tiny little Group 1 school placing top 3 in a county that's loaded with Group 4s, Group 5s, and now, a non-public power. So again, I think they've continued to show that they're on the rise. So yeah, Ridge had 4 champs. Hillsborough, I think, continued its run. No team in the last 4 years has had more champs than Hillsborough. They added 1 to that total this year. So yeah, I think it was a good weekend all around.
Moving on from the county tournaments to some big time duels we had this week. One team that really made a statement coming into the week, we knew it was going to be a little bit of make or break with 3 quality opponents. And the Jaguars of Jackson Township High School came through with a 3-0 mark last week, down to the wire wins over Middletown South and Middletown North. And then they finished off the week with an emphatic sweep of a tri-meet, 64-10 over Clearview, but the big one, a 51-26 win over previously ranked number 12 Rumson Fairhaven. That was a massive statement win for the Jaguars to win handily against the 2-time defending Group 2 state champs. And Joe, we talked about this, again, coming into last week. And even before that, we had the Jaguars ranked, they're undefeated. They're still undefeated at 13-0 now, but really waiting to see what happens against a big time opponent. and they answered the call in all 3 matches and won in 3, distinctly different ways.
Well, as far as the Rumson match goes, one of the great lines head coach Gianni Gione threw at me on Saturday was they came out and wrestled that match with their hair on fire. And, he said they were really locked in, and he has mentioned how the team is starting to come together and, care about each other and wrestle for each other. And in case people do not know, this is a combined Jackson Memorial, Jackson Liberty team that are finally getting to know one another. It's been a different hero seemingly every match for the Jaguars so far. Both the wins over Middletown South and Middletown South were walk-offs. So they're getting production from a lot of people. Armani McCann, their 138-pounder, is obviously their best wrestler, but they don't really have any gargantuan holes. So, they're not losing 3, 4, 5 bouts in a row. So I think they're one of the hottest teams in the state right now. I do think they're going to push their way up. They were number 17, last week when we released our top 20, but they'll really get tested on Wednesday when Southern Regional comes to town, the number 7 team in the state. And obviously, the number 2 team in the shore behind CBA. I think it'll be a good dual meet. I just don't know if Jackson can match their firepower. But as you said, Bob, the Jags have answered the bell every single match.
Yeah, I mean, if this is the perfect time for them to be wrestling Southern in the sense that, they're wrestling extremely well. So, they'll welcome the Rams into town. That's a long-standing, old-school shore conference rivalry, and that should be an awesome atmosphere there on Wednesday night. Joe, you mentioned Jackson, just different hero every night. Speaks to the depth of that lineup. You had Logan Schlenk, their 215-pounder in the win over Middletown North, and he was down 7-0, fought off his back, came back, got a pin to set up Andrew Chitakapa for the walk-off pin. You had Noah Kovacs, getting the walk-off pin against Middletown South. And then in the win over Rumson, you had Armani McCann, in a matchup with Rumson's Joaquin Duque, 2 state medalists, and McCann came up with a pin, and that was a huge match there and enabled Jackson to win going away. So the Jaguars wrestling as well as anyone in Jersey now. They're going to climb in our forthcoming top 20, and we'll see what they can do against Southern Regional coming up on Wednesday. Jake, 3 teams that we've been, of your teams in your coverage area that we've been keeping an eye on, of kind of going back and forth, with some losses, some wins. Are they in? Are they out? Are Phillipsburg and North Hunterdon? And then another team that has just continued to skyrocket its way up the rankings is Delaware Valley. So some interesting results with all 3 of those teams this week. We'll start with Del Val, and the Terriers and the Fighting Andy Fitzes. They just keep winning.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, at a Group 1 school, that level of success is almost hard to fathom how they're able to maintain it so well. I mean, but, he does a great job with the feeder program there and getting kids out for the team. And I think what's most impressive about this Del Val group is, they have a lot of fantastic wrestlers, don't get me wrong, but they don't have a kid like Jaden Perez, who's now at Drexel, who's going to be potentially, 2 or 3-time state medalist. They don't have a kid like Garrett Tedimer from a few years ago, or even, I think last year they sent 4 or 5 down to Atlantic City. And yeah, they keep finding ways to win. And, I think the thing that's most encouraging to me about, what they did against North Hunterdon and against Phillipsburg is, prior to that North Hunterdon match, I think their closest margin of victory had been 25 points. They beat North by 14, which I think is certainly, a healthy margin. And that sort of put everybody on notice of, okay, here's this team that, it can not just go toe to toe with the defending Group 4 state champs, but actually beat them. And then, their ability to kind of grind out a win, a 1-point win against Phillipsburg, 31-30. And, having been around the Del Val program and talked to Andy Fitz before, especially after state titles, the thing he always stresses, and, I know he's a math teacher there, is, win big and lose small. So, he always emphasizes saving bonus and, especially if they win the flip and things go their way. And so that's exactly what happened. Matt Centre at 215 against Phillipsburg picks up an 11-7 decision over Phillipsburg freshman Ian Jankowski. That puts the Terriers up 31-27 with 1 to go. And Luke Seifert, who had never wrestled at heavyweight before, I think if I understand correctly, just needed to stay off his back and basically not give up bonus. And he won by losing. And so, he dropped the 2-1 decision to Ben Ellis, who's one of Phillipsburg's best wrestlers. But that was enough to give Del Val the win. And so, I think the Terriers know their identity well. And, they know what it is they're doing, what their goals are. And so I think they're wrestling as well as any team in the state right now. And while that was a tough loss for Phillipsburg, I talked to Coach Tim Longacre. He said he wasn't discouraged by it. He thought his guys wrestled for, all 6 minutes of every bout, which he said, was a welcome sight. And, that's part of the reason why they went down the shore this week and fared much better than they did last week when they went down there by beating defending Group 2 state champs Rumson Fairhaven 31-27, I think it was, or 32-31, excuse me. And, again, Matt Velez, who's a sophomore who was 2-8 on the year, got in on an armbar, pinned Rumson's Thomas Sweeney to seal the match with 2 bouts to go. And, for as much as we talk about some of the hammers that Phillipsburg has, whether it's Owen Garrix, Gavin Galetta, whomever it might be, Longacre's told me it's kind of about the fact that the no-name guys and the lesser-name guys are stepping up, and that's what makes them especially dangerous.
And that's exactly how you win big duels. You got to have 1 through 14 coming through. One guy that's been coming through all season long has been the aforementioned Christian Alvarez of St. Joe's Montvale. Just won the Escape the Rock tournament. He's returning state runner-up at heavyweight. He was nice enough to take some time out of his day and talk with Ryan about all things Christian Alvarez and St. Joe's and what's coming up in the future as well. So we'll let you take a listen to that right now, Ryan's interview with Christian Alvarez.
What's up, everyone? We're here with Christian Alvarez from St. Joe's, who as of Saturday is an Escape the Rock champion. That goes nicely with his title at Powerade from a few weeks ago, and also runner-up finishes at the state tournament last year and at the Beast of the East. Christian, you beat Cale Melnick from Blair for the second time this year, this time 13-12 in the final. Did Farinaro and Cooperman have to pull you off the mat? Because that must have been a crazy 6 minutes there.
Yeah, no, for sure. I got down pretty significantly there in the third period, and I just toned into our training, what we do in the room, and I was ready for that situation. That's what we trained for. Being down big, just we call it the bully drill. Just going after a guy for however many seconds are left on the clock, and trying to get back in the match, and that's what I did.
How much did Coach Farinaro and Cooperman preach, just wrestling the full 6 minutes and just preaching gas tank and stuff like that in practice?
I mean, that's the base of our training right there. When you say gas tank, that's the main thing that we focus on, being able to wrestle the full 6 minutes, being tough, especially in dual meets, when we need bonus points or, guys need to be tough. That's where we I think that's where we separate from others.
Now, did that day become harder, being that it was all condensed into a one-day tournament?
Yeah, no, it was crazy. It was rapid fire after the quarterfinals match is when they, announced that's what we're doing. So I think I was back on the mat for my semifinals within 25 minutes. So it was pretty crazy.
And how much does a guy like Cale test you? Because he was a 190-pounder as a freshman, then 215 last year. So he's kind of light for a heavyweight, quick on his feet. Is he a tough test? You beat him at Powerade too as well, right?
Yeah. So I think he adjusted pretty well to how I wrestle after the Powerade match. I think he wrestled me a lot smarter, and he's a very technical guy. And, like you said, he's fast on his feet. So he was a very good opponent, and, props to him.
What do you feel like he learned most, and what else besides just his quickness makes him tough each time you wrestle him?
He's just an all-around tough guy. He keeps wrestling, especially in the first match he was down. He just kept coming at me. So when he got that big move on me, I knew it was going to be, tough to get over the hump there and, score some big points on him and come back in the match. So that's what I did.
Right. And how much does an Escape the Rock title mean to you? I mean, that's something that Jimmy Mullen, I don't believe, ever won. So
yeah,
they don't grow on trees.
Yeah. In the beginning of the season, I set 3 goals for myself to become Powerade champ, Escape the Rock champ, and a state champ. So, being 2/3 of the way there is awesome, but, the job's not finished. So we just got to keep going.
Right. And how much does, the tournament you guys had as a team mean to you? I mean, you were one of 4 finalists. You had Charlie make the finals. He beat his future teammate, Justin Farnsworth, to make the final, I believe it was. And then you had Mikey Batista and Brian Little also make the final. So how much of a fun day was that for you guys down in Southeast PA?
Yeah, no, it was awesome, man. I love when our guys all do well together. It just shows like how much of a team we are and, how tough our guys are.
Right. And how much of a important stretch is this for your team? I mean, like we talked about before the call, you have Bergen on Saturday. By the time you listen to this podcast, this will come out Wednesday morning. We're going to be hours out from the PC match. I mean, how big is this next couple of days for you guys?
Yeah, this is a huge statement week for us to show that, we're still in this race and we're still fighting. We're ready to take down anyone in front of us.
Right. And I look at the rest of your lineup. I mean, we haven't even mentioned Ryan Mitchell, John McGinty, Ben Marquez, who transferred in from West Essex. Joey looks pretty good. Even Angelo Paino, I see the strides he's made.
Mm-hmm.
How well-rounded is this team?
Yeah, I mean, that we're still figuring out the toughness part, but I think we definitely have the guys and we have the talent to be able to go do something special come February. So
when you say the toughness part, what do you mean by that?
I just think that, we're a bunch of gritty guys and, we're going to pick up our lunch pail and go to work. We're a blue collar team and we're not going to back down from any fight.
Right. Is that kind of the identity you took on last year? I mean, you were the 6th seed, right? In non-public A, you guys took on that underdog role and kind of embrace it. Does it feel a little similar or what?
Yeah. I mean, when you compare the seasons, they're pretty much parallel on like how it's panning out so far. I mean, everyone's already counting us out. They're saying, they're not the same team as last year, but we heard a lot of same things last year also. So I just think we like to tone out the noise and let the results do the talking.
Right. Now let's talk about you a little bit more. I mean, heavyweight, you were the state runner-up last year to Rocco Delegata. I mean, I know many others would peg you as the guy to beat. I would say you are, but you look at the rest of that weight class. I mean, Mateo Vinciguerra from Woodstown's real good. Tommy Borgia. There's a lot of good guys in that weight. I mean, how tough is this path going to be back to the state final?
Yeah, for sure. It's going to be the toughest test of the season yet for me. I'm ready to go after anyone that's in front of me. So I'm not going to back down from any fight. And I know that the job's not finished this season. So I just got to keep working and keep achieving to be my best.
And what did you learn from last year, that run to the state final? Anything you picked up just, first time in AC?
No, for sure. It's a very tough tournament. It's a 3-day tournament, unlike any of the other ones we go to. So I think last year by the 3rd day came, I was, my body was all worn out. I wasn't able to, give it my all out there in the finals. So I just think that this year I have to learn how to, keep myself in the tournament, adjust to, being there in the 3rd day and being able to give it my all.
Right. And lastly, you're committed to play football at Delaware. I know you had a couple wrestling opportunities you passed up, but how much are you just enjoying every match, every moment here? The last couple months you're going to be wrestling.
Yeah, knowing that it's going to be my last run around the sport, I'm just leaving everything out there. There's nothing to lose. All these guys that I'm going against are going to wrestle in college. I'm just a guy that's going to play football, having fun out there on the mat. So that's like kind of my mindset here this season.
Kind of reminds me of Benji Shu last year. He's going to play track and he's like, it's all gravy. So
yeah,
kind of thing. But all right, that's Christian Alvarez, guys. The St. Joe's heavyweight state runner-up last year. We'll see the Green Knights, like I said, on the home mat against Primus Catholic on Wednesday, just hours out from that match when you guys hear this. But I'll be at that match. I'm looking forward to it. So good luck, Christian. I'll see you in about 24 hours.
Yeah. Yes, sir, man. I appreciate you having me on here.
All right, good stuff.
All right, thank you.
Good stuff, Ryan. And again, we thank Christian for taking the time out of his day to join us and talk about his season so far and what you can expect from the Green Knights going forward as they look to defend their non-public A team championship. And now we will welcome in a guy we've been looking forward to talking to for a couple weeks now, and that's NJ.com's girls wrestling reporter, Mike Holcombe. Tons of stuff going on the girls scene around the Garden State. So we're going to jump in and talk about all that stuff going forward. There's been some big time stuff. One of the bigger tournaments of the season, the Queen of the Hills Many of the top teams in the state were there, and Mike, that did not disappoint. You got a good glimpse of what we can expect later on when we have the first state team tournament. So, Mike, fill us in on all the happenings with the girls. Jackson Township still reigning supreme, but some teams on their heels, huh?
Yeah, absolutely, no doubt about that. I mean, Jackson's still number one. I mean, but here's the thing: they had their tests over the weekend, not just at the Queen of the Hill, but at the Shore Conference tournament. They beat Central Regional in what was the closest team tournament race ever in the history of that tournament. Only 9 years, but the most ever. It was so close; it came down to 185-pound final. Central's Samantha Sotomayor lost to Manasquan's freshman Chelsea Garay, and if it had been the other way around and she'd pinned it, the Central would have been the champions. So Jackson's number one, but as Jackson coach Joe Lemke told me at the end of the tournament, the teams are coming. So I think that's absolutely true. Of course, the big story coming out of the Shore Conference was Ava Bonilla of Jackson, the 100-pounder, and Kylie Goodowitz, 114 for Howe. Both won their fourth consecutive Shore Conference tournament titles. That is unprecedented. That's the first time anybody's done it. Of course, Bonilla did it first at 100, and then about 10 minutes later, Kylie Goodowitz did it. And what was really impressive about that was the people they beat. Ava Bonilla got a second period pin over Noah Allen from Marlboro, who was a state place winner last year. And Kylie Goodowitz defeated Marlo Donato 10-0, and Marlo Donato is a two-time state place winner. So those two girls are really separating themselves from the pack, and it was just really impressive. 7 of the 8 teams were in the top 10. So I mean, it was a dogfight, and there were some incredibly wild results. I don't know how else to describe it. I mean, Jackson managed to hold off Central 39-30, but the thing you really got to remember about that is Central was wrestling without Jade Hahn, the 2-time state finalist. She's been out coming off of an injury. She just got cleared, and she'll be back this week. So, there's no telling how that match plays out, when team tournament time comes rolling around in February. Of course, Jackson has been missing Jada Figueroa, the 120-pounder. So she is expected to be back maybe this week. She's been battling injury and illness, and, she's a state place winner. So, it was 39-30, but there's no telling what that outcome might be. Jackson won the final. They beat High Point 36-33, came down to the final bout. I mean, High Point's a tough team, but here's the thing. Central beat High Point in the pool rounds, 31-30 on criteria. They had to go all the way down to most first points scored. That's how close that was. So, of course, probably the very best girls wrestler in the state, Ella Palillo of High Point, wrestled, but got the test of her past 2 seasons against Liliana Alicia, who was a state champ 2 years ago at 185. She lost, but she lost 6-0 to Ella Palillo. That may not sound like that big a deal, but last year Palillo only gave up 2 points, and that was both times when she allowed somebody up for an intentional escape. So, people have not been challenging Palillo, and for Alicia to go 6-0 with her, it is probably one of the great individual bout accomplishments so far this season. And of course, Alicia won the Shore Conference tournament, and boy, looked brutally good doing it. She beat Eliza Toth, who had defeated her in the Queen of the East back in December, 14-4 in the final, and really put it on her. So, I mean, I have to say that, you know, when you look at a team like Central, they've got some big guns, and they are and they're not afraid to use them. So that, you know, I think that's a team that we really have to look at. They haven't really been much of a dual meet power before now, but with Jade Hahn back and Alicia and of course there's a younger Hahn out there, Jayana Hahn, who won the short conference tournament this week. She qualified for states last year but didn't place. You know, that's a pretty powerful lineup, and if you take a look at just all of the other players on that team, boy, they wrestle tough. You know, they're hard nosed. They come at you, and you know, I just think that's a really tough dual meet team. And I don't know how that's all going to turn out, but you know, that was a pretty good team. They were a pretty good team this weekend. I'll tell you that much. So,
and Mike, you know, this will be the first year of, you know, an NJSA team tournament for the girls. They'll be up at Rutgers as well. It seems like there's, you know, real intrigue of who can take this. Obviously, Jackson is the top team, but those results have been really close. Central, as you mentioned, with Jade Hahn coming back, Liliana, you know, Alsea wrestling really well. I know they have Sophia Van Splinter also in the middle of that lineup, who's one of their top wrestlers. High Point, as you mentioned, with some juggernauts. I know Gloucester also is a team that's been solid. Do you anticipate, you know, a real, you know, kind of down to the wire, thrilling atmosphere there at Rutgers? It just seems like that way. Like, nobody knows who's going to win that, and I think that would be a really good introduction, you know, to the team state tournament for the girls at Rutgers.
Yeah, I'll tell you, going into the season, I really wasn't sure that was going to be the case, but it sure seems like it now. I mean, I think the really key thing about the Queen of the Hill duels is that it really sort of gave you a taste for what that team tournament is going to be like. I mean, the intensity all day at that thing was off the charts. I mean, when Jackson was wrestling Central, it was deafening in there. And, you know, and they're not even, they didn't even fill the gym, of course, because, you know, the snow, it was a snow day, and, you know, and a lot of people weren't getting there, and girls wrestling doesn't tend to draw the crowds anyway. But I mean, it was a wild event. And I think you're going to see a repeat of that in the state team tournament in February. I mean, you know, obviously, you know, they're going to be coming out of the South. You could very well be seeing a High Point Jackson rematch. And I don't know how that plays out with Figueroa getting back in the lineup for Jackson and whether High Point can keep. But, you know, you can't count out a team like Morris Hills. They did the same thing last year. They had a bad Queen of the Hill duels, and they didn't have a terrible tournament, but they lost to Gloucester and they lost to Ramsey up in North Jersey, which is a team that forfeits a couple of weights every match, but is just a solid team up and down the lineup. But, you know, last year they did the same thing. They rallied at the end of the season and were one of the top three teams in the state by the end of the year. So I think you're going to see great battles in the North and the South, but I think the South is going to be particularly interesting because you've got Jackson and you've got Central, and boy, they look to be on a collision course. But here's the thing: Gloucester beat Central last week before the Queen of the Duels in a dual meet, and pretty handily. So, you know, I think by 12 points. I think it was 42-30. Of course, you put Hahn in there, and that's probably a 12-point swing. So that's a semifinal in that sectional that could be the one to watch. So I think you're absolutely right, Bob. It's really going to be, for a first-time team tournament, I think this is probably as competitive and good as you want it to be.
Great stuff, Mike. One more, I'll put you on the spot for a little bit here before we let you go. New Jersey has some great girls wrestling, and you mentioned a lot of those names. In your travels so far this year, has there been somebody that you've seen out there that's an under the radar wrestler that you think could make some noise come individual time? Because it seems like every year there's always one, and we're talking about making noise. We're talking about someone who's going to get all the way to the state final, potentially, you know, win it. It just seems like there's always that one weight that ends up being a little wide open and someone that comes out of nowhere. So anyone that's caught your eye so far that, you know, isn't, you know, those top tier because of what they've accomplished in the past, but that you think can do some damage in Atlantic City?
Yeah. You know, I have to tell you, I'm trying to look at some notes here because there most certainly are. There have been a few girls I just shake my head and look at it. But I'll tell you, one of the girls I saw this weekend was a sophomore from Point Pleasant Beach, and the names may sound familiar to a lot of you guys. Her name's Cecilia O'Cone. She's a 120 pounder. Her dad, of course, was, Brick Memorial. He bleeds green. Brick Memorial was a coach. The famous Diver Dan, if you follow nicknames that are handed out by many other teams. But, she had always been kind of a hot and cold wrestler and didn't qualify for states last year. But, boy, she ripped through the Lady Patriot tournament at Freehold Township the previous weekend. I mean, with just lightning quick pins, and she just blew through the short conference in the same way, and beat a pretty good girl, pinned a pretty good girl in Michaela Vigilante of Southern in the final, and I mean that girl just looked stoked and ready to me. I'll tell you what, 120 is a brutal weight. She may or may not make it, but I think that's one girl that I think can really can get something done.
And Cecilia O'Cone, the daughter of, as you mentioned, Mike, former Brick Memorial head coach Dan O'Cone, led the Mustangs to a pair of group championships, was also a standout wrestler at the beach. So Dan breathed some green and gold, but he definitely bleeds some garnet first, I would probably say, from his time over there at the beach. So, Mike, great stuff from you. We appreciate you taking some time out of your day and catching us up with everything happening in the world of girls wrestling. And, we'll definitely have you on a little bit later to, again, get some more info and pick your brain on what to look for, when it comes time to crown champions, team and individual. So, Mike, thanks again.
Okay, no problem.
So that's the girls wrestling stuff from Mike Holcombe. Always great. Listen, Mike's got his finger on the pulse of all this stuff, and great to have him on and getting some more details of, the team race and some individuals to watch. Move on to talk of our individual rankings that we go through. And, that's always a time-consuming task for us. Some weights are nice. Nobody loses, and we kind of go on. Other weights, not so much the case. So we'll get into that now. Ryan, I'll start with you. A weight that is becoming more interesting and seemingly by the week is 144 pounds. And I think there's still some intrigue about some guys that could potentially drop down or maybe move up. So I think that's only going to get a little bit crazier. So, Ryan, like I said, 144, pretty fascinating here as we hit mid-January.
Yeah, 144 is officially getting crazy, guys. I mentioned the Hibbler pin of Gideon Gonzalez. Those two switched places in the rankings. Bobby Duffy gets a win over Anthony DePaul from Delsey. That also shook up the rankings. But everyone's kind of chasing Ryan DeGeorge, right? He's a two-time finalist, two-time state finalist, that is, one-time champ. And he was a little banged up to start the year, had an ankle injury that he's now, working past. Delby's finally starting to look a little healthy, so that's good. They have a loaded schedule coming up this week that we'll kind of wrap up this episode with, looking ahead to. But, Loudon Henry's also at this weight. He's got, some pretty valued experience. So this is a really fun weight, with a lot that could happen later on in the season. And, Bob, you mentioned a kid who could come down, some changes. Does Sonny Amato, come into this weight later in the season? So it's going to be very intriguing to see what happens. But 144, we mentioned 215. You're going to talk about 106 again, it's just bananas already there at 106. But I talked about 190 already, but 144 is already becoming one of those crazy weights.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's the wrestler I was referring to, Sonny Amato. I mean, he's been wrestling 150 all year. He hasn't given any indication to us he will go 44, but I think we all feel that that's possible. Maybe we're wrong. Maybe we're right. We're going to find that out pretty soon. But if he were to drop down, yeah, that would make 144 even more interesting.
Hey, Bob.
100. Yes, Joe.
Just sorry for interrupting, but, we talked about it yet on Monday when we were ranking, and Bill had some thoughts, based on where he wrestled recently. Is Sammy Spalding going to go down to 32? You want to talk about rattling weight classes and making changes. Bill, I mean, what do you hear? And I know it's out there because I spoke to the RBC coach, Joe Gallagher, yesterday on Monday, and, he said he heard the same thing. I mean, what do you think the reality of that is, Bill?
I think it's a strong possibility now. Again, we talked about Escape the Rock. Sammy Spalding did compete at 133 pounds there. But again, there was the 4-pound weight allowance, so it was really like 137. So that's not really, coming down. He started the year a little late, was a little bit banged up. And, obviously just kind of taking his time to get his weight down and under control. But I think it's realistic. I mean, he could win. He's probably the favorite at both weight classes. But I think that realistically, I think he's probably going to go down. We haven't seen it yet, outside of obviously this weekend, but with the weight allowance, what wasn't a full weight cut. But I wouldn't be surprised. I would probably even predict that he would. But we'll see where he is going forward. From this point on, Camden Catholic doesn't have any other big tournaments or really dual meets, where they would have to set their lineup, up until, that we get the states. So I'd keep an eye on him in the next few weeks. I would imagine if he's going to do it, we would see it by the beginning of February, but I think he's been trending in that direction. But we'll see, where he ends up.
And 32 is already an exceptionally strong weight. You have Watch on Hills, Anthony DeAndrea, Ricky DiLorenzo from Toms River East, Colton Hagerty from Washington Township, Sal Barametti from St. Peter's, Aiden Yarusi, who's on fire right now from North Hunterdon, Dalton Weber from Pope John, Mikey Bautista from St. Joe's. So that's already a really deep weight. You add Spalding into that, that becomes, maybe the deepest weight in the whole tournament. And that's saying something because we have a lot of strong weights. But this is all speculation because we don't know where anyone's going yet. So once we know that, we can really dive in deep into those weight classes. The volatility of 106 continues to be a topic of discussion, and that was the case again this week. A lot of movement all over the place. The big result was Delsey senior Adam Froelich won by fall over CBA Santino Edgar at the Escape the Rock. Edgar was number 1 last week, so that really threw the rankings all over the place. We also had St. John Vianney's Riley Corial with a 1-point win over Southern's Jonas Lusker. We looked about 75 different ways to try to get Corial into the rankings, but he had some other losses, some guys out of the rankings, and just the depth there is really hard. So unfortunately, he's on the outside looking in right now, but he is certainly on our radar. Same thing with John Tarantino of Red Bank Catholic. Some really good wins, just fell a little bit short, and that speaks less about their wrestlers and their ability and what they've done, just more to the depth. At 106 pounds, you have Middletown North Junior Thomas Blewett, who was sent to number 1. As I mentioned, Jonas Lusker. Despite the loss, he stayed in. He's got 2 wins over North Hunterdon's Caden Wadle. You have Finn Anderson in there, who has losses to Santino Edgar and Caden Wadle. So, 106 is pretty wild right now, and I maintain this is going to be the most interesting weight at the state tournament, just because I think it goes so many different ways. I think you look at the rankings, the top 8 we have, and you can even go beyond that, and there are multiple state championship contenders. The way the rankings look when you look at them this week, the following week could be completely different. There could be all 8 spots could have different guys occupying those spots. So that's going to be fun to watch going forward. Always have to check the 106 results because as this season has proven, you never know what those results are going to show you. Another weight that was had a lot of intrigue after this week was at 215. We had some key matches at the Escape the Rock bill. So, what are you seeing at 215 now as far as it changes towards the top of the rankings as well? So some significant movement.
Yeah, it's a weight class we were really looking forward to at that tournament because we had 6 of our 8 ranked guys there. Nico Gonzalez made the final as the number 4 seed, upset the top seed Cash Colbert, who's now the state wrestler. But Tyler Palumbo continues to rack up statement wins. He second round faced Anthony Jackson again from Polo 6, who he beat at the Beast of the East. That first match, he was down 4-0, came back and won that 6-5 in the last minute. And then this one was 1-1 in the third period and gets a reversal and pins him. And then he went on from there and beat Delsey Sal Marquez. So Palumbo continues to move up the rankings. Also, as I mentioned, the fact that it was a one-day tournament one of the things that did occur that was a little bit unfortunate, and not just the 215, but some other weight classes, was anybody that lost in the early rounds, basically that they eliminated the deep wrestlebacks. So, if you lost in the first couple of rounds, you only got 2 matches and then you were done, as opposed to having a chance to wrestle all the way back for third. So we would have seen maybe some more of those matchups in the wrestlebacks, whether it was, Marquez, Rocco Salerno from Seton Hall, Jackson, even Palumbo, maybe facing some of those guys because he ended up losing in the semifinals. But Palumbo's had now 3 good performances at 3 big tournaments. Was third at Beast of the East, was second at Powerade, now fourth at Escape the Rock. Is certainly going to be a factor when we get to states, and we probably won't see many of these guys facing each other again really until we get to Atlantic City. But that's definitely going to be one of those weight classes where anything can happen.
And those are just a few of the weight classes that we had some movement in. So make sure you head to NJ.com and check all that stuff out, along with the rest of our wrestling coverage. We had a lot of stuff going on this past weekend. So tons of stories, photos, and all that on the website. Let's look ahead now to the coming week, where there's a lot more on tap. There's no rest here in terms of the impactful tournaments and duels. We'll start off with the Morris and Passaic County tournaments. That's Ryan's area up there. Again, those will be going on. We'll start with Morris. Ryan, anything that sticks out that you're going to be looking for and looking forward to at the Morris County tournament?
Yeah, and before we get into the tournaments, I want to just highlight a couple of the big duels we got coming up. Delby's going to wrestle Faith Christian on Thursday. So when you hear this come out on Wednesday, we'll be a day out from Delby versus Faith Christian, 2 top 5 programs in the country right now. Then they have Malvern Prep from PA, another PA school, the next day. So Delby's got 2 big duels on tap, hosting both schools. And then you have St. Joe's hosting Paramus Catholic on Wednesday. That's today, when only a couple hours out from that when you hear this podcast. So should be an awesome matchup there. 2 top 8 teams in the state. And then you have St. Joe's hosting Bergen Catholic on Saturday. That could be for the league title, depending on what happens between the Paladins and Green Knights on Wednesday. Then you have St. Peter's hosting Blair on Friday. They had their match last Saturday canceled with Faith. So St. Peter's is going to be back on the mat for the first time since the Doc Buchanan tournament. That's coming up on Friday. And then obviously a lot more great duels coming up. Jake mentioned the Don Bosco Pascack Valley match. So that's another one. But like you said, Bob, Morris and Passaic. I'm going to be at Passaic on Saturday at West Milford. Coach Pevney and the guys do a great job with that. But at Morris, I think you're kind of looking at just another Mount Olive coming out party. I mean, with no more Del Barton in that tournament, Del Barton's out of the NJAC, out of that Morris County schedule. You're kind of looking at Mount Olive. They dominated that tournament last year. Hanover Park was a little bit behind them. I think they were like 80 to 100 points behind them. But Mount Olive should, I would think, dominate once again. They're even stronger this year, more well-rounded and balanced, really, from 106 to 285. So I think that they're going to have another year where a lot of kids are on the podium and at the top of the podium. But some great individuals. Bill just mentioned Nico Gonzalez, the Escape the Rock runner-up. He upset the Beast of the East champ and Cash Colbert, as Bill mentioned. But Joey Monticello, Tommy Borgia, there's a lot of really good individuals at the Morris County tournament. But at Passaic, I think you're going to be looking at, DePaul. They got those 3 kids Jake mentioned on the last episode, Joey Rizzuto, Isaias Hernandez, and they're really loaded. I mean, DePaul is so good. Delvin Rod as well. So a lot of guys who medaled last year. Joey Rizzuto was a state medalist last year. You're talking about, not only county medalists, but state medalists at this tournament. Passaic Valley's really good. Dante Benvenuti, Joe Benvenuti's his dad, the athletic director there, but Dante Benvenuti, Will Capizzi, Richie Brightweiser. So there's a lot of kids who were good last year and the past couple of years coming back at the Passaic County tournament. So I'm really looking forward to it. 2 really good tournaments up north.
We've also got the Essex and GMC tournaments. Look for coverage, on NJ.com from Jake for that. Friday and Saturday, Joe and I will be at Lakewood High School for the Shore Conference tournament. And Joe, we've been talking about this a lot leading up. I think the biggest question is who will be there. There will be, we're pretty confident of the returning, big guns that'll be there, returning champs. Killing Coluccio, Lacey. You have Matt Gould, St. John Vianney. Bubba Gavrish, if he's healthy for St. John Vianney, is defending champion. Sonny Amato from Rumson, Jay Clayton from Point Borough. So there are some returning champs, but as in years past, we know Southern Regional, has not entered the short conference tournament in several years. Christian Brothers will have wrestlers there. We're anticipating that they will not have their full lineup, so we don't think we're going to see, all of their big time wrestlers. There's still some good wrestling to be had. We expect Howell to bring its full lineup, and you'll see Tanner Hodgins. We could have, a great final potentially with Tanner Hodgins and Alex Reyes of Homedale. Hodgins, the Oklahoma State recruit, Reyes committed to Rutgers. But Joe, I think that's what we're going to be looking at when these seeds come out soon. Who is entered and who is not, and how does that shape the way we look at these brackets?
Well, we're also hearing that Red Bank Catholic may bail and go down to the Pine Barrens duels. RBC is looking to get some head-to-head matchups with a couple of teams from South Jersey who they would see in their districts and their region. So that's another one because, RBC is really on a roll. And last year, Bob, we saw partial entries. It was a kind of disappointing, I think is the word, because, we had kids forfeiting out of third place bouts because of match counts. And, while there will be some nice wrestling going on there, it's really hard to say you're the best wrestler at a weight class in the short conference when the two best teams in the short conference aren't there. Will Rumson enter Sonny Amato, or do they hold him back for match count reasons? So I think there's a lot more questions than answers heading into this weekend, Bob.
100% agree. You look at the top wrestlers in the short conference at each weight, and you're going through it and you're saying, this is a potentially really good final. This is a matchup I want to see. And as of now, we don't know if those matchups are going to happen, not because wrestlers could lose before then, but because they might not be entered in that. There could be weight classes where, you look at 106 pounds, for example, if CBA doesn't enter Santino Edgar, we know Southern won't be there, so you won't see Jonas Lusker. If Red Bank Catholic doesn't enter, you won't see John Tarantino. That's three of the best 106 pounders in the shore and in the state, and you might not be able to see them wrestle, and that goes down the list of all the weight classes. So it really is wait and see. I hope we see as good of wrestling as possible, but there's the very real chance that a lot of these weights are a little bit watered down. So we'll see what that looks like when we get there, Joe.
Bob, they're going to seed the short conference on Wednesday morning. So when people look at this, they can pretty much know that the short conference seeding is ongoing. And another tournament this weekend that is really underrated is the Colonial Valley Conference Tournament, formerly the Mercer County Tournament. I've had the pleasure of covering that tournament for 4 years when I worked out in Trenton. And that is a terrific tournament because literally every single kid wrestles his butt off in that tournament because, kids from some of the public schools out there know they're not going to get to the regions or they get to the states. And this is their opportunity to get on a podium, and they wrestle like crazy. Hopewell Valley has dominated that tournament recently, but Steinert's having a good year. As a matter of fact, Steinert and Hopewell Valley will have wrestled Tuesday night for to see who's the best team in the CVC out there. But also this weekend will be CVC. Mike Holcombe will be there for us.
And then down in South Jersey, there's a lot of stuff going on. First, a really, really key duel that we'll have broadcast live on NJ.com. That's Washington Township and Kingsway. Bill, those have been two of the best teams in South Jersey all season. I know that's a matchup you've been looking forward to. What do you think is going to happen there? What are some of your keys? What are you looking for in that duel?
Yeah, this is becoming one of the better rivalries, I think, in South Jersey. They've competed 5 times over the last few years. 3 years ago and 2 years ago. Washington Township won the matchup in the regular season. Kingsway came back and beat them in the postseason. And then last year they didn't end up meeting in the postseason, which will probably be the case again because Hal moved into the South. They used to be the 2-3, and then last year they ended up being the 3-4. So this will probably end up being the matchup for the 3rd seed. And even though they're both in the division with Delsey, so it may or may not impact the division seedings. This is going to just be a great matchup between two teams that are close. I mean, we saw in the football season those teams had 2 tremendous games against each other. The Township won both of them on the way to a state title, and the wrestling programs are both very good. Kingsway is a traditional power that was down last year and is now definitely on the way back. They finished 3rd at the Jack Welch over the weekend, even though on Saturday they were missing 4 or 5 guys. I know they're hoping to have a full lineup this week or close to it. I think they're a little more balanced than Washington Township, for sure. But Washington Township has the hammers down low. That's their strength. So it's and a lot of the good freshmen for Kingsway are down low, and Washington Township could neutralize them, or Kingsway could potentially pick one of them off, and that would be a big swing. I know in the Mustang Classic, Dylan Hetzel at 113, who just moved to our state rankings, only beat Evan Vallejo 4-3. So that's a key matchup. If Kingsway can swing it. So looking forward to another good one there. Should be a very entertaining matchup between these rivals.
And elsewhere, we'll have the Burlington County Open. Any individual, potential individual matchups that you're looking forward to there? Any specific kids you're looking to keep your eye on?
Yeah, I mean, as far as kids, I mean, the best kid there is Jackson Weller. He was a 3rd place finisher in the state last year, and he's only a junior and has won at that tournament the last 2 years. Dominic Marino was the most outstanding wrestler at the tournament last year from Cinnaminson. He is undefeated. I'm looking forward to seeing him. Daniel Finelli from Seneca, the 113-pounder freshman, has yet to lose. He's 18-0. So looking forward to seeing what he does in a tournament format here. And then Patrick Degnan, also from Seneca, is another state-ranked wrestler. He's a heavyweight that we have, I think, we're 4th in the rankings this week, if I'm not mistaken. So there's some really good kids there, and then it's an interesting tournament. This is the 5th year for it. As I've mentioned before, that there aren't many. This is the only real, as far as wrestling goes, this is the only one in the South. Years ago, there used to be a Tri-County tournament that they got rid of, but really in any sports, a lot of them either never existed or they got rid of them. The Cal's got a few tournaments in some sports, but it's just not as prevalent in the South as it is up north, where you see basically county tournaments in every area of the northern part of New Jersey. It just doesn't happen. So this is very unique for the South, and should be a good 2-day tournament down at Lenape Friday and Saturday.
Yeah, definitely a lot of good stuff going on around New Jersey. Thanks again, for tuning in this week, everybody. We enjoy recapping what's going on and, looking ahead, and, we're fans of this sport too. So yeah, it really is exciting to kind of take a look at, the upcoming matches and break it down. And, we're constantly talking amongst ourselves about, what to expect. And, hopefully that enthusiasm comes through here. So we'll leave everyone with that. I want to thank Mike Holcombe for joining us and talking girls wrestling around the state. Also, Christian Alvarez of St. Joseph Montvale. Thank you to him for taking some time to speak with Ryan. And we'll sign off from there. For Joe Zedalis, Bill Evans, Ryan Patti, and Jake Aferiat, I'm Bob Batters saying thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on NJ.com.